Good morning and welcome to the Mini Storage Messenger Self-Storage Webinar Series. I'm Poppy Behrens, publisher of Minico Incorporated, and we're delighted to have you in the audience today. This is one of several informative webinars planned for self-storage owners, operators, managers, investors, developers, and other industry professionals. The sponsor of today's webinar is Lodi, California-based Litton Property Management. Our presenter is Tom Litton, a well-known self-storage industry expert who heads Litton Property Management and the Self-Storage Management Division of Litton Management and Consulting. Tom began his self-storage career when the industry was in its infancy and has managed over 150 facilities in 11 states. He currently manages and/or owns 21 commercial properties in Indiana and California, and also fee manages and consults on a daily basis in the United States, Australia, New Zealand, France, England, Scotland, and Canada. Tom has conducted over 150 seminars worldwide on various topics regarding self-storage operations, management, development, and ownership. His latest books, Auditing Self-Storage, Preventing Employee Theft and Embezzlement, and The Key to Success, How to Manage Self-Storage, are available from Minico Publishing. 2009 marks the 30th anniversary of the Mini Storage Messenger, the original voice of the self-storage industry. Each issue of Messenger provides readers with in-depth news and information. Its cover stories and feature articles explore the most timely industry topics and trends. In addition, monthly columns contributed by industry experts and accomplished business professionals address a wide range of topics, including security, facility operations, technology, legal issues, legislative updates, construction, and development. We also publish a variety of other self-storage data sources, such as the ones you see listed on your screen. For more information, please visit ministoragemessenger.com. Just as a reminder, if you have not attended our webinars before, today's webinar is being recorded. It will be available for viewing on demand from our archives at ministoragemessenger.com. We invite you to submit questions throughout today's webinar. To do so, simply type your question in the question area and click Send. While we will try to answer as many questions as we can during the Q&A period at the end of the webinar, those that cannot be answered due to time constraints will be answered by Tom by way of email once the webinar has concluded. Today's presentation should run about 45 minutes, with the remainder of the hour open to questions and answers. And now it's my distinct pleasure to turn the presentation over to one of my favorite people in the self-storage industry, Tom Litton. Good morning, Tom.
Good morning, Poppy. Thank you so much. I'm glad that all of you had time today to sit in on this webinar, because managing self-storage, primarily self-storage managers, is probably the single most important thing that you do on a daily basis. If you look at this first slide, I've got a picture of my childhood hero. And the reason that I chose him is that as a kid, I liked the wholesomeness of the TV show that he acted in, called The Andy Griffith Show in Mayberry, North Carolina. It was the fictional town in which he was the sheriff along with Barney Fife. And one of the things that I loved about Andy, even as a child, is he had a kind, gentle way in dealing with people. And when I became an adult and I got into the position where I had to lead and inspire and motivate and manage other people, I was always looking for material to sort of give me some guidance on what was the best way to approach people and to motivate them and to seek their cooperation and get things done. And I remember as a kid that Andy Griffith seemed to have this uncanny ability to give credit to other people and to elicit their assistance, and he would take time to listen to them, and he would provide leadership not only in his own office but for the entire community. So needless to say, when I became an adult and I started re-watching some of those old Andy Griffith Mayberry, North Carolina TV episodes, I realized that they were just little pearls and gems of managerial principles. So some of the managerial principles that I use as a leader in managing and operating self-storage facilities, I actually derived by watching these television shows as a child, and I actually go back and rewatch them occasionally as an adult, because they're just replete with great management principles on how to get people to do things and how to solve problems and yet at the same time act as a good manager. So let's talk about where we're headed in this industry. We all know that it's a stressful time and that we've got things sort of facing us that we've never really faced before. One of the things that we've all discovered is that customers right now are reevaluating their decisions to store, and we all knew that this could potentially happen someday. Foreclosures are at an all-time high. That's good news for self-storage in the short term, because oftentimes we'll see short-term rentals when people have to vacate homes and move into apartments and so on. But long-term, it's not good for self-storage, because 74% of all self-storage renters are single-family homeowners. So for the long term, foreclosures can be bad for self-storage. And we know that 51% of self-storage customers actually elect to use self-storage. In other words, 49% of our customers use self-storage because of a necessity, which is typically a relocation. But the other 51% of our customers actually elect to use self-storage. So customers are re-evaluating their decisions to store. And this places a new burden on us, especially in terms of management. Lawsuits are beginning to rear their ugly head. My very good friend Alta Walters deals with self-storage litigation almost every day, and she reports to me constantly about new claims that seem to be coming into storage facilities, because when the occupancies turn, it's typically because the economy is failing and people are looking to find compensation in some way or another. So managing just lawsuits has become more of a burden on those individuals that are responsible for day-to-day management. Facilities are losing occupancy. If you're saying to yourself, gee, I'm wondering if this is happening to other people, I can tell you that facilities nationwide, as a matter of fact worldwide, are losing occupancy right now. The banks and their failures have caused ripples in our industry that we're probably going to have to deal with for the next 3 to 5 years. As you know, new construction has stopped. Refinancing is now more difficult, if not virtually impossible. So we will probably struggle for the next 5 years, we meaning those of us that are responsible for filling these storage facilities back up. And the other thing that I've discovered is that good times, which is what we've had for probably the last 10 years at least, good times have a tendency to breed complacency. In the past, we haven't had to focus too much on marketing. We really haven't had to focus too much on customer service because customers showed up at our door anyway. So things have changed. What is the correct strategy that I want to use in today's competitive environment? Well, needless to say, and sort of the focus of this entire 1 hour that we're going to spend together is a refocus on management. When you focus on management, there are several things that you need to work on. For example, in the past, we've had a lot of complacency because we really haven't had to work very hard for our customers, but things have changed. To be successful today, we've got to become more customer service oriented. Today's manager has to become more involved in the day-to-day activities of the facilities. One of the things that I've noticed over the last 10 years is that owners have not been involved as much as they were at one time. And when we see sort of a decline in the economy, you'll see management, whether it's the facility owner that manages his or her own properties, or whether it's mid-level managers or management companies, we have a tendency to put greater focus on our facilities when they're in a state of decline. So you've got to become more involved in the day-to-day activities of your facilities. And the way to do that is to focus on marketing. Right now is probably the most important time to focus on marketing. Yes, nuts and bolts are important, but marketing is really paramount now. And the way to do that is to harness technology. You know, there are webinars that have been done by Minico on email marketing and things like that. We're going to have to use call centers more effectively. We're going to have to use some of the technology that's available to us now, and we're going to have to focus on marketing and couple that with technology to be able to do that. One of the things I think that's very important is to find a friend, and I mean a close, trusted competitor. It's important today to compare notes with your competitors to see whether or not they're experiencing the same increases or the same declines. And bottom line, today's strategy is going to involve a lot of hard work. I did a seminar just recently in Las Vegas, and one person raised her hand and says, Tom, what's going to be the secret of being able to manage in these troubled times? And I said, it's easy. And I yelled to the top of my lungs, hard work. That's the only way that we're going to be able to survive in this economy for a while. So what is management? When I went to college, I actually got a degree in business management and accounting. And this was a definition that I found in one of our textbooks, and I memorized it so that I could pass the test. But oddly enough, I've never forgotten it. Management is your role, or your role as manager, and more importantly, your role as leader, is that leadership is the ability to establish and manage a creative climate where members of your organization or of the organization are self-motivated towards the mastery of long-range constructive goals that are compatible with their personal values. And when I found this definition in college, and I've actually seen it several times since, I realized just how pertinent this really is, because managing any business, whether it's a construction crew or a storage facility, it's all about leadership. And it's whether or not that you can create a climate where all the participants feel as though that they are a creative member of that organization, and they understand what your goals are, and your goals are compatible with their goals. So that's my classic definition of management, if you will. One of the things that I've seen over the years in doing so much consulting in the self-storage business is there's a management style that I call the supervisor style. And supervisors have a tendency to over-supervise, but yet at the same time under-manage. And what I've discovered over the years is that most managers actually resent being over-supervised. And a lot of large companies especially will create a lot of bureaucracy, a lot of rules, a lot of what they feel are management tools to manage the storage facility. But the reality is that most managers resent being over-supervised. Taking the supervisory role or taking that supervisory management style is easy because the results are measurable, but the reality is that self-storage managers, for the most part, don't need supervision. What they need is direction. And so let's talk about your management style and the type of management style that you may choose for your properties. Property managers, especially, this would be your mid-level property manager, or it could be the owner acting as the property manager of multiple properties. But property managers must command the respect of their managers. And this is one of the biggest problems that I've seen in the self-storage business between the managers that are working behind the counter and that mid-level property manager or the owner that interacts with the facility manager, is that the manager of the managers has to have a good working knowledge of the business. In other words, if they don't know the business well, then they'll never command the respect of their managers. I also have found that most property managers or owners fail to visit the property with a specific agenda. So for example, I actually have a 4-page agenda that I would be more than willing to share with any of you, but I have a 4-page agenda that I use when I visit a property. And oddly enough, the very first thing that we always talk about is salesmanship and marketing. That's the first thing on my agenda. Good property managers or owners are good teachers, coaches, and mentors. And if you'll recall, for any of you that have seen those old Andy Griffith episodes on television, Andy was the quintessential teacher, he was the quintessential coach, and he was the quintessential mentor. Good managers and owners need to invest apron time. Apron time means that you take the time to actually go to the facility, work behind the counter, and see what life is like, even in your own properties. And sometimes it can be very revealing when you do that. What about leaders? Well, this is kind of what we want in our society. We're actually craving leadership right now in almost all aspects of our society. Why? Because we're in crisis. And when you're in crisis, people need leadership. They don't necessarily need supervision. They might crave management, but the reality is that leaders determine the direction of the organization or of the economy or of the state, whatever it happens to be, but they do not row the oars. Disciplined leaders, by the way, learn to live by the numbers. So when I visit my facilities and I look at the actual numbers, it's not enough that the facility is clean. It's not enough that the customers are well taken care of. We also have to discipline ourselves to learn to live by the numbers, which means, by the way, that you have to take the time to look at the numbers. For example, one of the common things that I hear in my consulting is that when I ask owners, how are you performing in terms of your occupancy, your collections, and on your rent exceptions. And very few owners can actually tell me those statistics or even get close to an estimation. And in order to be an effective leader, you have to display to your people, the people that you lead, that you take the time to look at their numbers and that you're analyzing those. Managers don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. So it's also imperative to take time with your people so that they know that you actually care about them. Leaders make tough decisions, and it's not always popular. I always tell my managers, I'm not running for office, I'm running a business. So when push comes to shove, the leader makes the tough decisions. And then leaders teach and live company values, and we'll talk more about that in a few minutes. Yeah, let's see, I got to get my slide to advance here. There we go. Now, ultimately what we're looking for in any management style is that if you craft your management style correctly, there comes a point where you can pretty much take your hands off on the day-to-day tactical control of the facility, and then you can then fulfill your leadership role. But you have to work at that, and you have to cultivate that relationship to be able to do that. Now, what I mean by that is that I can give a person a fish, and I can feed them for a day. But if I teach them to fish, I feed them for life. That's why I take the time to sit down with my managers, and I explain to them the rationale behind my thinking and how I approach decision-making and how I reach certain decisions. And though it's time-consuming to do that, it's beneficial because my managers oftentimes will make decisions in my absence, and they'll make decisions exactly the same way I would make them. I'll give you a good example. I had a manager, had a customer one time call me on my 800 number, and he complained. He was a handicapped customer. He wanted to rent a storage unit from us, and he complained that he was told by the manager on the telephone that the only way he could rent a storage space is if he came down to the facility and filled out the contract first. And he explained to my assistant manager that in order to be able to do that, he would have to spend about 4 hours on the bus each direction because he had to transfer and wait for certain buses that had a wheelchair lift. And so he really wanted to rent a space from us, but he found it kind of cumbersome. Now, ultimately, he did rent the space, but he actually had to wait a few days and have a friend bring him down. So I went to the facility, and I caught the assistant manager there at the facility that was there on the day that the individual phoned into the facility, and we had a discussion. And I said, look, I want to explain something to you. I'm not saying you did anything wrong, but let me tell you how I would have handled that. So I explained to the assistant manager that had I received that call, I would have said to the handicapped customer, I would have said, sir, where do you live? And of course, he'd probably give me his address. And I'd say, I'm going to have a cab come over to your house and pick you up, bring you down here. We'll sign the paperwork. We'll get everything set up on your storage unit. I'll have the cab wait because it shouldn't take us more than about 15 minutes. And I'll simply have the cab take you back home. That way we can make sure that we take good care of you, and at the same time, we're trying to minimize the hassle in renting a space from us. So my assistant manager said, you mean we can do that? And I said, absolutely. I said, you're always better to ask for forgiveness than ask for permission. So I took the time to explain to that person how I would have solved the same problem. Good managers need little supervision or management. However, we all need leadership. So what you don't want to do is to allow your facility to become manager-driven. In other words, don't just sit back and just hope that things will always work out. If you want to be a good leader, you have to get involved. 80% of your problems, by the way, stem from 20% of your employees or your managers, and this is true in just about any business in America. We call them managers, but why don't we treat them that way? So what I mean by that is that I share the financial statements with my managers. They know exactly how much we pay for yellow pages. They know exactly how much we pay in property taxes, and oftentimes they're astounded to find out just how much it costs to own and operate a self-storage facility. One of the things that I think is very beneficial is to ask your managers for marketing plans. Now, oddly enough, the marketing plan that I use is actually very simple. It comprises one page of information, and it's a 30-day marketing plan with a few bullet points and a few commitments as to what the managers will do for the next 30 days. It's amazing how well a marketing plan works, because when you set a target and you create a plan, you have a tendency to meet the goals that you commit to. And one of the ways of doing that is to conduct what I call a red flag meeting. A red flag meeting is where you sit down with your employees every month. You go over the numbers, you go over the performance of the facility, and you make commitments for the next 30 days. And I actually do that every month. Most of the time I do it over the telephone. Occasionally I do it in person. It's important to give your employees decision-making authority. I have, once again, that old saying that says, don't ask for permission, ask for forgiveness. So I teach my employees to make decisions, and if I disagree with them, we'll talk about it. You need to pay your people for superior performance, and once again, you've got to teach them the owner's mindset so that they know how to make the same decision you would make in your absence. Behavior is the result of forces in the person and their environment. So employees make conscious decisions about their performance. They really do. Every employee has different needs. This is one of the problems when you see the larger companies that have a lot of facilities. You know, they try to adopt a one-size-fits-all approach, and there are pros to that, but there are also some cons. And one of the cons is that every employee has different needs, and the only way to uncover those needs is to spend time with your employees and find out what motivates them. So employees do what they see that is rewarded. And employees do what you do, or they do what you tolerate. This is really important, especially for owners and mid-level managers, that when you visit a facility and if you see something that you disagree with, it's important to always address those issues immediately on the spot, because employees do what you do. In other words, they will treat customers the way they see you treat them, or they will do what you tolerate. So standing there and watching poor customer service or a poor habit of some sort tells those employees that by not saying anything, you're actually tolerating the behavior, and that's really not something that you want to encourage. Motivational factors, by the way, change constantly. There is no one set standard for what motivates people, and what initially motivates a new manager will not motivate them in the second year, the fifth year, the 10th year. And money, by the way, is not always the best motivator. As a matter of fact, the longer an employee is with you, the less importance the individual places on money. Ego needs are far more important than we think when motivating employees, and you usually get what you reward, not what you want. And this is especially true with bonus programs, and if we have time, we'll talk a little bit more about that. You need to determine what each employee values. They all value different things, and so you've got to be very clear and specific about the performance that you desire. And those are called performance standards. And if we had more time, I could probably spend a couple of hours on just performance standards alone. If you're interested in some printed performance standards, you're welcome to email me, and I'll send you what I use. But you've got to make sure that your performance standards are attainable. Now, what I mean by performance standards is that, for example, in delinquencies, I measure them in 3 different ways. One of the ways that I use to measure delinquencies is we take the actual total dollar value of all the delinquent dollars, and we divide that by the projected rent, or what we call the rent roll. And my managers know that at any given time, that statistic should not exceed 25% of the rent roll in total delinquent dollars. They know that's one of the 3 performance standards that relate to delinquencies. But what I did is I codified that, and I made it not only a formula that they could actually use and determine on their own, but that standard is actually attainable. And I actually have, probably about 35 of those same type of standards just like that. So you've got to clearly link your rewards to performance, and you have to determine what factors counteract the effectiveness of your rewards. So make sure that the reward is actually worth it. This is one of the biggest problems that I see with bonus programs, is that when I actually sit down with managers and talk to them about what motivates them and what doesn't, I find out that the bonus program, though they like to receive the money, it doesn't really motivate them towards the desired behavior that the owner wanted. So you've got to develop a positive vision. Most people crave leadership. And you do that by thinking big and constantly looking for exciting ideas. You want to encourage others to do their very best at all times. This is where you become the coach. You want to set and maintain high expectations, and lavish them with praise. You can never overdo enough praise, whether it's with children, whether it's with your horse, or whether it's with your employees. In terms of performance problems, be precise in your analysis of a problem, and you've got to ask yourself, is this important, and what would happen if I did nothing? And in some cases, you're better off to pull your hands off and not do anything. But in most cases, you need to weigh in, determine what the problem is, and try to make some corrective solutions, and some commitments to each other. But if it's not important, you need to learn to just forget it and move on. Not all problems can be solved. Some of them are just temporary. Whenever I discuss performance, I always discuss performance and not the person. And the way to do that is to use facts and not assumptions or rumors. You want to be objective because the numbers don't lie. And you want to be clear on what is acceptable and how to reach it. And the way to do that is to listen carefully and then to also share the blame. And this is especially true with face-to-face performance discussions. Learn to analyze your mistakes. As a matter of fact, last week I sent a case out to all of my managers, which was a public storage case. And it was kind of an interesting case. I sent it to them, and I asked them to read the case and to tell us what we could learn from it. And so not only do I analyze my own mistakes, but I also analyze the mistakes of others. You want to focus on the future and not on the past. You need to recognize your employees' ideas, but then add yours as suggestions. So be careful about always making everything your idea. And when you're having a face-to-face discussion about performance, allow your managers to save face. Summarize your understanding, and then it's a good idea to always follow up in writing. So praise the manager and talk about their achievements and their value to your company, and then follow up and review their progress. I've learned over the years that I always schedule face-to-face discussions, especially if it's about performance that I'm not totally happy with. I always do that at the beginning of the workday when the blood sugar level is high and the ability to actually listen and understand and cooperate is at an all-time high as well. How do you become a better coach? You know, what's interesting about coaching is that even Tiger Woods has a coach. All of the great sports figures that have ever achieved anything of any notoriety have all had coaches behind them. And we hear a lot about the sports figures, but we rarely ever hear very much about the coach. So to become a better coach, you've got to learn to assign responsibilities and give your managers authority. This is one of the biggest problems I've seen with the supervisory management style, is that the property manager or the owner wants to handle everything. They even make the managers call them on their cell phones to see whether or not they can waive a late fee. That's not the way to manage very many facilities. You've got to give your managers time to do it their way, and guess what? You've got to let them make mistakes. Now, if you see they're going to make a royal mistake, that's the time to interject. But they learn through their mistakes and by making them. Observe what they do, but be available to help only if they ask for your help, and then discuss performance and give guidelines for improvement, and once again, make sure that you analyze your successes as well as your failures. Always project confidence, respect, and trust with your managers. Be flexible and be open to feedback. Once again, establish high standards, but never sanction incompetence. In other words, if you see incompetence in any form and you walk away and you don't say anything, that's basically the same thing as saying that's okay. So set a good example. 75% of learning is by imitation. They do what you do or they do what you tolerate. Be friendly, but not cozy friends. I'm talking about your coaching relationship. The reality is your managers want you to be the boss. They don't want you to be their best friend. They go to other people for that role. So I tell my managers everything, and I expect them to tell me the same. Only steal from the best, by the way. Constantly look for new ideas from your best competitors. Some of the best ideas that I've gotten have been from my competitors, and some of my best ideas, especially in terms of marketing and operations, have actually been from other industries. So invest heavily in loyalty. If they think that you are loyal, they will give you the same in return. Remember that when you are fair, you are credible. And never be too busy to laugh, joke, and confess. Remember, we're just renting grubby little storage spaces. We're not curing cancer. Let's talk about hiring and recruiting and firing for a few minutes. Wow, talk about a difficult subject. We could probably spend the entire day on this. But hiring and firing are the two most important tasks of the self-storage owner or manager. Successful hiring is key, absolutely beyond any other description. Hiring the right people can either make your life wonderful, or hiring the wrong person can make your life miserable. So hiring determines your success or your failure. Even if you are great at hiring people, you'll only experience a 66% success rate, and that's even if you're really good at it. By the way, some people have a knack for choosing good hires, and some people don't. Hiring competent and motivated managers is the most important aspect of self-storage management, absolutely positively the most important. The first law of self-storage management is selection, Hiring is an art that's forged through mistakes and experience. And it's because hiring the wrong person is the most expensive mistake that you can make. Customers are very leery of turnover, training costs are wasted, and needless to say, there are a lot of associated legal costs when you make the wrong hiring decision. The most common mistake made by owners and managers is to rush the hiring decision. You've got to learn to take your time. I deal with owners all the time as a consultant where they were under the gun, they hired this couple or they hired this individual, they kind of suspected that it was going to be a mistake, and lo and behold, almost every time you think that way, it winds up being a mistake after all. And oftentimes it can be very costly in terms of litigation and other types of costs. So be careful when you hire in desperation. That's the worst possible position to be in. When you hire a manager to solve a pressing problem, your tendency is to hire the first warm body that comes along, and you have a very low probability of actually finding a great manager under those circumstances. Part of this is because the number one fear of most managers and owners is that they cannot run the facility in the event that the manager quits. And so it is a founded fear, but it's because most owners don't dig in and learn the day-to-day operations, nor do they have anyone else in their organization that they can fall back on. And that puts you in a precarious position if you have to hire out of desperation because your office is sitting there empty. What about matching the employee to the job? Well, the best way to do that is to look at the outputs that we expect. So if I have written performance standards, which I do, I use those. But you have to look at how often they're reviewed. Are they easy to measure? And can the employee tell if they meet them? This is what's really critical, by the way, in performance standards, is that your employees have to be able to measure themselves for performance standards to work well. So what are the ideal skills of a self-storage manager candidate? Well, I've done a lot of work on this over the years in identifying those individuals that have a high propensity towards succeeding in self-storage. And here's what I've learned. They have to have good interaction with other people. In other words, a storage manager must be a people person. They have to enjoy people. They have to be outgoing and friendly. They have to enjoy serving others. This is really critical now because we put so much emphasis on customer service. And they have to be happy, believe it or not, with a cul-de-sac position. Now, oddly enough, I tell managers when I'm thinking about hiring them that self-storage is a cul-de-sac. It's just like that movie Groundhog Day. It's the same day over and over and over again. And I'm upfront about that. I tell them exactly what self-storage is like. I tell them what they will probably like. I'll tell them what they probably will not like about the job. What about their responsiveness and their energy level? Well, storage managers must be self-starters, and they have to be goal-oriented. They have to work independently. They have to use a lot of discretion before they act, and they must possess good follow-through skills. So if you hire the wallflower that needs a lot of direct supervision and that has to call and get someone's permission every time they make a decision, they're not going to work well in a self-storage environment. So once again, they have to be goal-oriented and make their own decisions and have strong follow-through skills. In terms of adaptability, storage managers have to be open-minded and flexible. So this is something that you're going to watch for in an interview. And they must not fear confrontation. Storage managers, especially the successful ones, will tell you that they deal with confrontation every day. It's just that most of the confrontation is mild or it's inconsequential. But storage managers deal with confrontation every day. So therefore, the last thing on earth you want to do is to hire someone that avoids confrontation at all costs. So what are the ideal skills in terms of communication? Well, managers must be open and expressive with their viewpoints. And they must be frank, sincere, but yet at the same time diplomatic and tactful. And then they must be able to communicate well in person and in writing. So these are the things that you would look for in an interview. And then their self-concept. Managers should be confident in their abilities. They should be motivated by pride and accomplishment. And they should be able to accept input regarding their shortcomings and suggestions. And then they should not take criticism too personally. And if you deliver it correctly, that's usually not a problem. And then in terms of their thinking patterns, managers need to be reasonably intelligent in a self-storage environment, but their work has to be purposeful, deliberate, and organized. And this is really critical. If you hire a person that's not inherently purposeful, deliberate, and organized, you're setting them up for failure. And then enthusiasm and innovation skills, it's a wonderful thing to get if you can get that in that same person. And managers, by the way, have a tendency to think the same way that they look, act, and dress. So when designing your job description, think about the following. What is the manager expected to do? List every function and responsibility. Decide who they will report to, and decide what type of attitude and personality that the successful manager must have. Now, interestingly enough, one of the best ways to do that is to think about past employees that were successful and determine what made them successful and why. And ask yourself what was the most important attribute for that position and hire for that attribute. And I'll give you a hint. If you want a sales and marketing personality, you have to hire them. Now, there are personalities out there that can take all the nuts and bolts and screw them together, and they can cross every T, and they can dot every I, and they can take every file folder and put it exactly where it's supposed to go. And those are wonderful attributes, and we need those in our society. We need those in our offices. But the bottom line is that if I have to, I will always lean towards the individual that has strong sales and marketing skills. So you've got to match the personality of the manager to the personality of the facility, and this is really critical. So one of the things that I do with my existing employees as a way of finding a good source of job applicants is I actually offer a bounty. So when I have an opening at a facility, which, by the way, I don't have very many openings. My manager that's been with me the longest now has been with me for 18 years. But when I have an opening, I always offer this to my existing employees. I usually give them $1,000 to $1,500 if they refer someone to me that I wind up hiring. It's called a bounty. Allow good performers to relocate to other properties. Sometimes if you have an opening, you take a manager that's been very successful in one location and you move them to your new location, and that's sort of a perk, you know, for their stellar performance in the past, and they get to walk into a new facility with new challenges. By the way, Craigslist, believe it or not, is actually a very good source because so many people look at it. And when you advertise in Craigslist or newspaper or whatever, you want to advertise in the retail section, and you want to use words that emphasize customer service, computer, and small team management skills. So I'm always looking for good employees all the time. As a matter of fact, about the last 5 managers in a row that I have hired, I've hired from other industries. As a matter of fact, one of my best managers, her name is Cindy. She's down in Santa Ynez, California. Cindy actually worked for mailboxes, etc., as an area manager. And she has probably the best customer service skills I think I've ever seen in my entire life. She has strong attention to detail. She's very personable. And she works at a storage facility in an affluent area where she deals with celebrities and a lot of egos all the time. And so it was exactly what I needed at that particular facility. But the only way to do that is to look for good employees all the time. So if I'm out and about and I'm using some other business and I'm impressed by a person, I usually take my business card and I'll turn it over on the back side and I'll put my cell number on that business card, and I'll tell that person, if you ever need a job, give me a call. That way I know if they call me on my cell phone, I was impressed by them. Another thing is never hire family members. Rarely does this ever work out, and the other employees in the enterprise always resent the family members working in the enterprise anyway. And then it's not a bad idea to visit storage facilities as a hobby, because it's amazing how many good managers you see languishing in a facility somewhere else where the owner doesn't appreciate them. So if you have an opportunity, stop in to existing storage facilities and evaluate what you see. And if you're impressed by it, make a note of that and give that person your business card, and constantly look for new candidates. In terms of newspaper ads, I find that advertising on the weekends is good. I resolve I have resolved myself to the fact that many unqualified applicants will contact you. This is true for Craigslist or Monster.com or any other website or advertising media that you use. I always advertise in the retail section of the paper, not management. I advertise in retail because I'm looking for retail-oriented people that have strong customer service skills. And I never use the words self-storage in the advertisement. And the reason that I don't use those is that the managers that I've hired that have been very successful for me have all said to me that had they seen the word self-storage in the ad, they would not have responded. But once they got into the industry, they realized that self-storage actually pays better than retail, and the working conditions are far better too. So write out and follow a written format and take copious notes. In other words, know your questions in advance. I have a scenario that I use called my deserted island. I sometimes will give them customer service scenarios, and I'll ask them plenty of what-if questions. There's no magic or secrets in interviewing other than you want to take time, you want to slow down, and you really want to explore. Now, the way to do that is to use what I call the exploratory interview approach. And the way I do that with people is I say to them in the interview, look, I'm glad you came in today. Did you respond to my Craigslist ad, or was it my newspaper ad? And they'll tell me why. And I'll say, well, today is an exploratory interview. And the way that works is I'm going to tell you what my job is all about, and then I'm going to tell you what you're going to like about it. I'm going to tell you the things that you may not like about it. And I explain to them that our objective is to match the person to the job, not the job to the person. And I explain the benefits package, and then I tell them what self-storage is like. I tell them the attributes of a successful self-storage manager, and I tell them that at the end of the interview, if I don't think there's a fit between you and us or us and you, I'll tell you at the end of the interview, and that way you'll know when you leave here. And so at the end of the interview, after a lengthy discussion, I'll ask the candidate if they see a fit. If they see a fit, then I'll tell them that we'd like to proceed a little further. If there's not a fit and the fit's not evident, I'll tell the applicant right then that, you know, I think that you're probably overqualified. I don't know that you're going to enjoy self-storage based upon what you told me. Thank you for your time today, and good luck in your job search. So I'll tell them at the end of the interview whether or not there's a fit. Now, if I still see a potential fit, then what I like to do is I like to look for their past achievements and awards, indicators of any past results. And I ask myself, did they ask me any intelligent questions? I tell the applicant that I expect them to work really hard. And then I view that initial interview as a first date because that's their opportunity to impress you. So I ask myself, did they make any effort at all to impress me? Now, interestingly enough, if I'm interviewing an experienced storage manager, one of the things that I'll do is I'll ask them their opinion about certain self-storage issues that we all debate all the time at every convention, like anniversary versus first of the month. I'll ask them about their delinquent tenant policies at their previous employers. I'll ask them about customers that interrupt them after hours and how they handle that. And so I get a pretty good insight as to, you know, what type of work environment they've worked in before and whether or not that's still going to fit with the way that I like to lead and manage. So one thing that I've learned is that you have to interview a potential job candidate at least 3 times, Now, interestingly enough, you need to learn to trust your instinct or your gut. Men have a tendency to not trust this because they don't think it's logical. I think men's instinct or gut feelings are probably just as good. It's just that women learn to trust them, whereas men don't. That's why I always have an applicant interviewed by a woman, someone that's close to me and that I value her opinion, because women have better BS detectors. So I always have a woman interview a potential applicant, and I always have that applicant interviewed by my best manager and my worst manager. Sometimes the managers ask me, which one am I? But I don't really have any worst managers. Maybe I'd use the word weak or new. So I will always have that individual interviewed by my top manager or my manager that's working at a facility that has a personality very similar to the facility that I'm trying to fill. And the reason that I do that is, for example, Cindy down in Santa Ynez. If I have a facility in Carmel, California, where I know that the potential manager is going to have to deal with celebrities and a lot of egos. I want Cindy's viewpoint on that individual because Cindy does it every day. If I have a facility that's in an economically challenged neighborhood, then I may want one of my other managers to interview this person. So what we do is we put this person through 3 or 4 interviews, and then we all get together and we openly discuss that candidate and what we saw in that person. And then the participants in my interviewing process will give me their insight as to whether or not this person is worthy of being on our payroll. So past performance is almost always an indicator of future success, so ask questions about that. I try to hire on proven past performance only. Ask the applicant what past experiences will enable them to succeed with you. And then if you're interviewing an experienced manager, try to determine if an experienced manager has 10 years of experience or simply 1 year's experience 10 times. So you want to spend the time to try to ferret that out. Resumes should be simple, honest, and should focus on accomplishments and all that stuff. Resumes tend to only accentuate the positive, and they tend to just be informational. What I'm really looking for, by the way, in a resume is whether or not it's professional and whether or not there are typos and inconsistencies in the resume. It's probably more valuable for that than anything else. References are almost worthless. Notice that I said almost worthless, and it's because so many people are afraid of giving out references. They're leery of being sued or having that old employee come back on them. Many companies will give a good reference in exchange for the old person leaving in peace. So what's critical in talking to references is that you want to talk to the references yourself personally. And here's what you want to do. You want to call that reference personally, and you're going to ask them about their strengths. And of course, they're going to come out with their litany of things that they thought that the person was really strong at. And then at the end of the conversation, you're going to say, I know that, of course, we all have strengths and we all have weaknesses. And so on balance, and to be fair, I was wondering if you could tell me what you thought Bob or Mary or Cindy or Ted's weaknesses might be. And you'll notice that oftentimes they'll struggle with that. But if you build a good rapport, you'll start noticing some cracks in the armor sometimes. They'll start talking about weaknesses, and they'll start revealing things that they otherwise would have kept close to their chest. So if you're calling a prospective employer, ask to speak with someone who worked with the applicant. That's probably the best possible candidate to talk to. And always ask the question, is there anything else I should know? And when you ask that question, say it exactly that way. Is there anything else I should know, Poppy? And then be quiet. Don't fill in the blank. Don't say anything. Wait for her to respond. Oddly enough, people become nervous and they feel like, well, I'm assuming that she told you about the workman's comp claim, or I'm assuming she told you about the lawsuit. And it's amazing what people will say sometimes if you say just that one question at the end of the reference check. The actual decision is yours. Your entire success as a property manager or owner rests with your ability to hire the right person. So always hire slowly and de-hire quickly. The most common mistake made in personnel management is the quick hiring decision. So here's what I do. I ask myself these questions about the new hire. I've talked to the person a couple of times. I've had my crew talk to them. And we've all gotten together and we've conferred, and now it's Tom's decision. So I ask myself, does this person's personality match the personality of the facility? That's important. Then I say to myself, would I enjoy spending a week with this person if I were stranded on a deserted island? And then I say to myself, if I owned the facility, or if you owned this facility, would you hire this person? Now, I say that oftentimes to my crew that helps me evaluate people. I'll say to my manager, James, I'll say, James, if you owned that facility, would you hire this person? And oftentimes, James will have a different response. And then I'll say to them, figuratively in my mind, would you let your mother fly with this person? Now, what I mean by that is when I was taking flying lessons years ago, I had a flight instructor from Norway. And I remember he was debating on whether or not to solo me, and I'd only flown for 6 hours. And so Kurt said to me, he says, Tom, he goes, I'm wondering if I should solo you because I just don't know. I don't know if you're ready, but I think you're ready, but I'm not know. And I said, well, Kurt, I said, it's easy. I said, would you get out of that seat and let your mother sit there and let me fly around the traffic pattern a few times? And he goes, no. And I said, then I'm not ready. Now, 3 hours later, I asked Kurt the same question. He said, yeah, I think I would. I think you're ready. So, in other words, choose some criteria that works for you. But you want to take the time, you want to think about this person, because remember, you're hiring your success or you're stamping your failure. So there are 3 things in life that you want to take seriously: a person's dogs, their kids, and their money, in that order. Money is a very serious topic. So let's talk about compensation for a minute. So what are the motivating factors for self-storage managers? Believe it or not, when you poll managers, when you actually poll them, they'll tell you that they're more motivated by job autonomy. Number 2 on their list is the living quarters, especially if they live on site. Number 3 is health insurance and your benefits package. And money actually comes in number 3 or number 4 for most people in terms of motivating factors. So if you pay peanuts, guess what? You get monkeys. Now, I will say that in the self-storage industry, we've made great strides in actually raising our level of compensation for our managers. If you went out tomorrow and you bought a $6 million Learjet, would you hire a minimum wage pilot to fly it? Probably not. So research the going rates for self-storage managers' compensation, and if you have a good facility where the economics are great and there's a lot at stake, you're going to pay at the high end of that. So determine how much you can pay based upon the economics of the facility. Now, managers want and expect a bonus program. I can tell you from experience that there are certain ratios that work really well. And one of those is if you take your total compensation package that you want to pay a manager, let's say it's $50,000 for the year, I try to structure the fixed salary at about 70% of that number, and the bonus program, which can be variable, it's based on all kinds of criteria, I try to structure that at about 30%. That seems to be the right mix. If you have too much fixed compensation, and maybe 90% fixed and 10% bonus, the bonus is not enough to get any additional motivation out of the employee. But if you make the fixed too low and too much in bonus, then they're leery to even take the job to begin with. But 70-30 seems to be about right. And then non-cash compensation, by the way, works really well. I have a friend of mine by the name of Tom Smith, and his managers are fiercely loyal to him. He has top-notch people at all of his facilities. And when I ask them, what do you like about Tom, they say, well, Tom is like the easiest guy in the world to work for. We absolutely love him. And he pays for our vacation every year, and he pretty much lets us pick wherever we want to go. You know, that's hard to compete with. Don't be afraid to pay well for good managers. Believe me, they're worth it. And if you choose to hire away another person from another facility or another industry, you're going to have to pay probably 10% more than their current salary. And then you want to make sure that you give your employees good benefits. Now, what are good benefits? Well, health insurance. Don't buy cheap health insurance, by the way, because a poor health insurance program will produce more dismotivation than having no insurance at all. And the reason that I say this is if you pick some cheap health insurance program, the employee feels like that's how you view their contribution. So if you pick a cheap health insurance program, even if you didn't have one at all, and you walk in one day and you say, hey guys, guess what, I finally got you a health insurance program, and the program's not very good. They see that as sort of a testament to your perception of their value. So buy the best health insurance that money can buy. I know that's difficult right now. In terms of lodging, if you have nicer living quarters, you attract a higher caliber of managers. So you ask yourself, my friend Tom Smith did this. He said, I'm going to build these apartments for the managers so that I would want to live in them, and he does. Cable television is critical, believe it or not, and then 1,000 square feet is almost minimal nowadays. So you cannot build little tiny one-bedroom cracker boxes and expect managers to be motivated by that anymore. Most managers get 2 to 3 weeks paid vacation as standard. I have to make my managers take time off sometimes, and I encourage them to take 3-day weekends, and sometimes I'll give them 3-day weekends as just an added bonus. 5 to 10 sick days per year. The way I do this is I give my employees 5 sick days per year, and I give them 5 personal days per year where they don't have to lie to me and say they're sick and pretend like they're coughing when they call in. They can just say, I'm taking today off because I got drunk last night. So being in contact with the public exposes them to more sickness, so consider offering days off without any explanation, which is what I do with what we call our personal time off, PTO days. Insurance. Insurance coverage on the apartment contents is pretty standard nowadays. My employees really like the dental insurance that I provide. I also provide eye exam insurance, and I also have life insurance for the employees. So all of this gets rolled into a benefits package. 401k plans are really good. Larger companies have a tendency to offer these. It's difficult if you only have 1 or 2 facilities. There are some tax benefits. The SSA plan is available, Self-Storage Association, if you're interested in that. And then 401ks, by the way, really do retain good employees. So a good bonus program is one where the manager can actually calculate their bonus within 5 minutes after the end of the month close. So when you're tailoring a bonus program, that's your ultimate goal, is to try to make the bonus program simple enough that it can be easily calculated. Bonus programs have to be tailored to each individual facility. You cannot have a one-size-fits-all bonus program. And I like to use tactical versus strategic bonuses. Now, tactical bonuses is where you have to constantly change them and solicit the input from your people, but a tactical bonus is where you use bonus programs and you change them frequently to move towards desired behaviors that you want. So for example, if you want to see your free move-in truck used more, then you put a bonus on that. And then longevity bonuses are really good, especially if a manager is working in an economically challenged neighborhood. A longevity bonus is where you tell the employee that if you stay for X number of years at the facility, I'll give you sort of a cash compensation if you stay there for 5 years. I have a friend of mine that did that at a facility that's in a really horrible neighborhood, and he had some really great managers that stayed there for 5 years just so they could get what Paul called his golden handcuffs. There's a problem in dealing with people that I've seen in my consulting over the years, is that you have to start your managers off right. Once you've made the decision and you've hired them, most owners hire new managers and then they throw them to the wolves, and they sort of use a sink or swim approach. And I've seen so many really good employees ruined by that. So remember that new employees require a great deal of hands-on instruction, support, and feedback early in the relationship. So don't make that mistake. Just like a baby, the first month of a new manager's employment determines their attitude and their success. So what I do with new people is I always give them a peer mentor that they can call on the phone to just purge their feelings about a customer that might have just been nasty to them in the office, or they can call up and complain about me if they want, or they can call up and get help with the computer. It doesn't matter. You want to assign a peer mentor to a new manager and treat new employees like a new lover. In other words, spend a lot of time with them in the beginning and then slowly taper your contact off. Most owners and managers do just the opposite. They throw them out there and they just expect them to do well. So take advantage of the honeymoon. Always give your managers too much to do, and give lots of feedback in the beginning, and find lots of examples of your new managers doing things right and evaluate them constantly. They expect that, especially in a new relationship. Now, in terms of day-to-day management problems, many problems are just temporary, and they are caused by outside events that are not controllable. So if you determine that that's true, be compassionate, obviously. Set limits and boundaries. Offer limited assistance, but keep your distance in personal matters. So for example, the most common one that I deal with is family friction, or a potential divorce, or you've got a person that's sick and they're trying to work through an illness or a sickness. So, once again, be compassionate, have some limits and boundaries, and state those. Offer assistance, but stay out of their personal lives. It's always better to do it that way.
Tom, I'm going to interject just for a moment because I know we're running a little bit over, but you've got such great information. I just want to remind everyone that might have questions to submit them now, and we'll try and wrap up here in the next few minutes. If we don't have time to answer your questions, Tom will personally answer them after the webinar.
Thanks, Poppy. So once again, remember, employees do what you do or they do what you tolerate. So watch your comments about customers. Always keep good customer service at the forefront. I was at a facility just the other day, and a customer came in, and he had some questions about whether or not a large moving truck was going to be able to get into the gate. And we explained to the customer that if they couldn't get in, that we would use our own free move-in truck, and if we had to, we would shuttle things back and forth between the moving van and his space, or we'd maybe jockey the units around a little bit, try to get him closer to the aisle. So I stood there and I put my hand on the customer's shoulder and I said, sir, I said, whatever it takes, we're going to make sure that you get in here and that you're going to be happy. So remember, you're always demonstrating the behavior that you want your employees to have. So remember, customers are not always right, but they are always important. So saying nothing is the same thing as saying yes. So you do have to get involved. Almost all employee problems are the result of two critical leadership mistakes, and it's either lack of direction or lack of feedback. The best investment in time that you can ever make is to train your managers to think like you do. One of the best ways to maintain good performance is to invest lots of time at a facility. Facilities are just like children. The more time you invest in them, the better little citizens they become. So share your expectations, create a system of analysis and feedback. Never assume anything. Always reward them, allow them to redeem themselves, and above all, always give them the respect that they deserve. And remember, what gets measured gets done. If you don't measure things, they have a tendency to not get done. So always praise in public and criticize or critique in private. Be specific about performance problems. And you've got to learn to be a good listener and listen to all sides first before you sit down and talk about performance. You want to monitor performance very closely and keep accurate notes and records of all discussions. Not all employee problems can be cured. Sometimes employees lose their motivation. Sometimes they do. I had one of my best employees. She was with me for 9 years, and she was just a little pistol. And I could see in about the last 2 years of her working in storage that she was just drained. And she eventually kind of lost her motivation. And before, as I saw that occurring, I went to her one day and I said, hon, I said, I think you're losing your motivation. You might want to go try something else for a while. And she goes, you know, Tom, you're right. She goes, I've given so much in this job, you know, I need a break. And so she and I decided that she could openly look for another job, and I would give her a glowing recommendation. And she actually found a job working as a secretary in a tile company, and she enjoyed it because she wanted to slow down a little bit and have children. So the only way I could have known that is if I stayed in touch with her and I evaluated where she was. And I could see that she was losing motivation, so I dealt with the problem before it became problematic. So the employee oftentimes is not competent to perform the job. This is actually rare in self-storage. If that's true, you can cure that with training. If the employee steals from the company, you just can't tolerate that. And sometimes what happens is one member of your team passes away, and so you don't have a whole lot of options. Now, I'm going to talk about this quickly and wrap this up. One of the most difficult parts of self-storage management is when you realize that you have to let someone go. And when this happens, you want to document why you're terminating this person, and you want to collect your documentation to support your position. Now, this is something that's going to involve probably having to call your company attorney and working through this because the laws do vary a lot. But I can tell you how to handle the people side of this. Once again, be slow to hire, but quick to de-hire. If you realize that you've made a bad hiring decision, jump on it quickly. In other words, I've had people before where I've hired them, I went through everything, I thought for sure I was hiring a winner. 2 weeks into the relationship, I realized that I had hired a chameleon. You know, the colors are now different than they were on the day that I interviewed them. I very quickly deal with that, and I let that person go early in the relationship. They are far less likely to sue you if you do that, and they do virtually no damage. What most of us do is we realize we've made a hiring decision, and we just hope it's going to get better, and we let them sit there for 2 or 3 years, and then we fire them out of anger, and then they sue us, and that's not what you want. So when you finally decide to make that de-hiring decision, you want to make notes about what you're going to say. It's not a bad idea to just write them down. Practice your delivery, and then you want to be firm, confident, and passionate on the day that you go in to do this. You want to prepare a severance package in advance. I normally pay 1 to 2 weeks severance for each year of employment. If it's a couple living in the apartment, I pay them $50 to $100 per day for every day early that they vacate the apartment. I give them 2 weeks, by the way, to get out. I offer to let them use the storage space for 2 months, and I also extend their health insurance benefits for 60 to 90 days. Now, you've got to conjure up your courage and get it over with. So always ask someone to act as your witness. You're better off to fire early in the week. In other words, fire the manager on a slow day and then you want to try to conduct the firing away from the facility, and you want to be candid and clear about what is occurring. I saw one time, I actually helped an owner do this, but he insisted on doing the talking, so he actually was attempting to let an employee go, and he really wasn't being very clear about it. So finally the employee came out and said, "Are you firing me? I think you're firing me, right?" And finally the owner said, "Yes." And he goes, "Oh, wow, good, I'm glad this is over." So be candid and clear about what's going on early on, which means you've got to practice this. Explain to the employee that there's no longer a fit between the employee and the company, and don't deviate from that statement. And don't offer specifics about the reasons. And terminated employees always want a long list of all the reasons why. You want to try to be as vague as possible, but once again, you want to talk this over with your legal counsel. Now, here's what's important from a people person perspective. You want to protect the self-esteem of that individual. You probably made a poor hiring decision to begin with. So ask the employee if resignation is desired. Do not make the decision personal. And fired employees are always devastated by the event, so allow them to vent their feelings. Sometimes we want to shut them down. We don't want to hear all that, but you've got to let them vent their feelings. Never, never, never change your mind once you commit to terminating a manager. So ride the storm out, let them cry, let them scream, let them beg, but never waver in your decision. So start by being very confident about your decision, and you want to plan it out and make sure that you're emotionally prepared for it too. Now, here's a termination checklist that you can use. I actually have a checklist that's even more extensive than this. If you want to email me, I'd be happy to send it to you. But it's all the the things that you would typically do: get the keys and change the locks on the door, reconcile the petty cash, and all that. So walk in the door with a checklist, because sometimes in the heat of the moment you'll forget things. And then remove their names from the calling, from the alarm company. And then I always ask them to remove all of their personal property right then. But here's something that's worked really well for me. I tell the employee that, look, a lot of customers are going to walk into the office and they're going to want to know what happened to Paul and Mary. And so I'll say to them, what I'd like to do is to talk about a cover story, and I'm willing to use the cover story as long as we agree with it here together. So in other words, what I'm saying is, if a customer were to walk in here tomorrow morning and say, what happened to Paul and Mary, what would you want them to hear? And so I allow them to craft the cover story with me. And so if we agree on the cover story, then I tell the new manager or the employees that this is what the cover story is, and this is what I want said to anyone that asks about it. And I do another thing that's kind of interesting, is I assure that departing couple or individual that their names will not be disparaged in any way by succeeding managers or other personnel, and that if they are disparaged in any way, that employee will be terminated, so that they get to leave knowing that they're not going to be poor-mouthed after they leave and things not said about them. So I assure them that their names will not be disparaged in any way. And it always seems to sort of help ease the pain, if you will, when you do that. So firing, dehiring, it's never an easy process, and it can be stressful on all parties, to say the least. So my watchword is that if you have to sit down and terminate someone, which is really hard, you want to terminate them as though they were your parents. So you want to be gentle, compassionate, and you want to help them save face. So practice the golden rule: dehire as you would like to be dehired. It's always a good idea to have a written employment agreement. That really helps a lot. And always choose to err on the side of fairness and compassion. Chances are the failure is probably mostly your fault, if not partially. So learn to follow the golden rule. Learn to live by the numbers. Stand for truth, honesty, and the American way at all times. Become obsessed with follow-through. Be consistent. Let your managers solve their own problems. Always consider the cost versus the benefit in every decision. Avoid snap decisions. Always get another opinion. Become a student of their job. And remember, self-storage is a simple business that is complicated by the fact that you have to deal with people. And this is whether you're working behind the counter or you're working with your managers. Now, here's some golden rules of management. Remember that the speed of the boss is the speed of the team. All human creatures crave attention, and you've got to spend apron time. In other words, you've got to dig in there and learn their job. If you measure results, you have a tendency to get them. And remember, you're not running for office, you're running a business. So be willing to share the bucks, make marketing your passion, Be ye a doer of the word and not a hearer only. In other words, you can't espouse how much you cherish customer service and then yet not demonstrate that to your own people. And then you want to always praise them in public and critique in private. And remember, properties don't compete, their managers do.
Tom, I think we're going to have to wrap up pretty quickly. I think if you have just a couple more slides, if we can get through them pretty quickly.
Yeah. Never talk about other employees negatively, by the way. And this is, I learned this early on as a manager of people, how important this is. It's sometimes tempting to walk into a manager's office and talk about another manager. The problem is they always say to themselves, I wonder if Tom talks like that about me to other people. So never talk about other employees negatively. Don't even be tempted to do so. Constantly think of little ways to reward your employees. I'm amazed every year. My managers always get flowers from me. They usually get a Starbucks gift card, and they always call me up and thank me for it. Now, you know, they don't realize it, but we have that on a calendar, and my assistant actually just makes it happen because I'm partially ADD anyway. Heaven forbid you expect me to get things like that done. But it's amazing how much impact that has on them because they realize that we really do care about them. So get and encourage others to have a life outside of self-storage. I think that's really critical, especially for those that are, live-on managers. And remember, we're not curing cancer. We're renting dinky little storage spaces to people who should probably throw that stuff away.
Thank you very much, Tom. Great presentation. Unfortunately, we are out of time, so if you do have questions, submit them now, and Tom will answer each and every one of those offline after the webinar has concluded. We'd like to thank all of you for attending and hope that we've provided some useful information to help you in your self-storage endeavors. You will be receiving an email by Monday with a link to the archived presentation along with a special offer for Tom's newest book, The Key to Success, How to Manage Self-Storage. So please make sure you watch your inbox for this email. And last but certainly not least, for more information about our upcoming webinars, please visit our website. Our next webinar will be held on August 12th, sponsored by the Mobile Self-Storage Association. The topic is 3 great ways to increase mobile business during a recession. So whether you're currently in the mobile business or perhaps thinking about it as a source of additional revenue, you'll definitely want to take part in this great webinar. Again, visit our website at ministoragemessenger.com to register or to listen to this archived presentation. Thank you everyone for attending and have a wonderful rest of the day.